I want to start this deep dive today by asking you a question, and I want you to really just observe your own immediate knee-jerk response to it.
Okay.
Here it is. When someone asks you, "How are you feeling today?" What is the very first thing that pops into your head to say?
Well, I mean, if you're like the vast majority of people navigating the English language, the answer is pretty obvious.
Right. Especially if you're someone who has, learned it as a second or third language.
Yeah.
Your default answer is probably just sitting right there on the tip of your tongue, completely unexamined.
Yeah.
You probably say, "I'm fine."
Or I'm good.
Yeah, or "I'm okay." It's automatic. It's a total reflex.
It is exactly what we are trained to say from literally the very first day we start memorizing basic greetings.
Exactly. But today we're going to look at why those default answers are actually a bit of a linguistic trap. Because let's be honest with ourselves here, those answers rarely, if ever, describe your actual internal state.
They really don't.
They're conversational shields.
They absolutely function as shields, yeah. Which is exactly what makes the source material we're examining today so relevant. We were diving into a specific English-speaking fluency guide titled Beyond Fine, Mastering Emotional Expression in English.
And it's such a fascinating text.
It really is. And the core premise here challenges a lot of traditional language instruction. The text argues that language is not merely a tool for transmitting facts.
Right, or data.
Exactly. It is fundamentally an emotional conduit. When we rely entirely on "I'm fine," we are essentially just giving a factual status update.
Yes.
It is the human equivalent of a computer pinging a server to say, its systems are operational.
Beep boop, I'm functioning.
Exactly. We aren't connecting. We aren't actually communicating the human experience, which means we're leaving a massive amount of communicative potential right there on the table.
And that is exactly the mission for our deep dive today. We are going to explore how moving beyond that factual, robotic English into authentic emotional expression is the ultimate shortcut to sounding natural.
It really is the key.
It's the key to making conversations personal. And honestly, it is the secret to unlocking true fluency. Because as a learner, you can memorize all the vocabulary in the dictionary.
A single word?
You can master the present perfect continuous tense. But if you cannot express how you actually feel, you're going to sound like a textbook.
A walking textbook, yeah.
So our goal today is to build a highly practical toolkit straight from this source material. We're going to look at how to express both positive and difficult emotions naturally without getting bogged down in all that complex academic grammar.
It's a profound shift in perspective, really,
Right.
because so many language learners spend years agonizing over the architecture of English.
Yeah, the rules.
Right, the subject-verb agreement, the precise prepositions, the syntax. But the architecture is just the building. The emotion is what actually makes that building habitable.
I love that. The emotion makes it habitable.
The source text emphasizes that when we communicate, particularly with colleagues, friends, or family, the underlying social expectation is that we offer a glimpse into our internal world. Emotional details are what make conversations, quote, more interesting and personal. If you strip the emotion away out of a fear of making a grammatical mistake, you're left with a highly sterile interaction.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to really examine the difference between a transactional conversation and a relational one. I think that is really the crux of what our source material is getting at here.
Definitely.
A transactional conversation is essentially just an exchange of data. It's going to the bank and saying, "I want to deposit this check."
Right.
Or going to the coffee shop and saying, "I need a medium dark roast." It's telling a coworker, "I have a presentation at 2:00 p.m." You are transmitting logistical facts.
Yeah, pure logistics.
But a relational conversation is entirely different. It's about building a psychological bridge between two human beings.
What's fascinating here is the way the text contrasts those two exact modes of communication and how easily we conflate them when speaking a learned language.
Oh, absolutely.
It explicitly points out the difference between simply stating a fact, like, "I had a presentation," versus adding the emotional layer by saying, "I was nervous before my presentation."
Right.
Think about what happens neurologically in the mind of the listener. When you make that subtle shift, when you say, "I had a presentation," the listener processes that as scheduling data.
They just hear a calendar event.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They might respond with, "Oh, okay, how long was it?" They respond to the facts. But when you say, "I was nervous before my presentation," you are triggering empathy.
Yes.
You are inviting the listener into your internal world. The listener's mirror neurons actually fire,
Mhm.
and they're far more likely to respond with, "Oh no, I hate presenting. Did it go okay?"
You've completely shifted the dynamic.
You have moved from a sterile exchange of schedule details to a shared human experience.
But let me push back on that for a second,
Sir.
because if I am walking into a high-stakes corporate environment, say a huge board meeting in London or New York, and I am already feeling insecure because English isn't my first language,
Right.
doesn't leading with vulnerability backfire? Like if I tell my boss I feel nervous, doesn't that just make me look incompetent or unready? Isn't there a very good reason we use "I'm fine" as a shield in those kinds of environments?
That is a completely valid fear,
Mm.
and it is a massive psychological barrier for adult language learners. In linguistics, we talk about the affective filter.
The effective filter.
Yeah, the emotional variables like anxiety or fear that prevent learning and authentic communication. You are right that in a hyper-competitive environment, pure, unfiltered vulnerability can feel incredibly dangerous.
It feels like a massive risk.
It does. However, the source material isn't advocating for professional oversharing or,
Mhm.
emotional dumping. It is advocating for emotional accuracy,
Accuracy. Yeah.
saying, I am a little nervous because this project means a lot to me.
A demonstration.
Demonstrates high emotional intelligence and investment. Whereas a flat, I'm fine, when you are visibly sweating, just creates cognitive dissonance for the listener.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The listener can tell you aren't fine. But because you won't name the emotion, a barrier goes up. The shield actually isolates you.
That makes a lot of sense. It creates cognitive dissonance because your body language is screaming one thing, but your vocabulary is giving this robotic status update.
Precisely.
It really explains why so many people learning a language feel like they are stuck on the outside looking in, even when their grammar is technically flawless.
Yes.
If you only ever focus on facts because you're terrified of making a mistake or appearing vulnerable, you just remain an outsider. You become a walking encyclopedia of events. I went to the store, I bought apples, I saw a dog.
A list of actions.
Right. It gets the plot across, but it doesn't let anyone know who you actually are.
Exactly. And when you're operating in a second language, there's already an inherent distance between you and a native speaker. Cultural norms differ, pop culture references differ.
The rhythm of humor differs.
The humor is a huge one, yes.
Yes.
You cannot always rely on shared cultural context to build a rapport, but fundamental human emotions, nervousness, happiness, relief, exhaustion, these are biological constants.
They're universal.
They're universal.
Yeah.
By stating the emotion, you are bypassing the complex cultural nuances and connecting on a biological level. The text insists that these emotional details are what bridge that cultural gap.
I love thinking about it through an analogy.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you're watching a movie, but you're watching it in black and white with the sound entirely muted, and you are only reading the subtitles.
Okay.
You can follow the plot perfectly. You know who is doing what, where they are going, and how the story ends. That is factual English. That is telling people exactly what you did today.
Right.
But speaking with emotional vocabulary, that is like suddenly watching the exact same movie in a vibrant, high-definition color with a soaring orchestral soundtrack.
Well, that's good.
The plot hasn't changed at all. You still went to the store and bought apples, but the experience of taking in that story is completely transformed. Adding words like nervous or happy, that adds the color to the black and white facts of your day. It makes people actually want to engage with the narrative of your life.
That is an excellent illustration. The factual narrative provides the scaffolding,
Mm-hmm.
but the emotional vocabulary provides the texture. Now, where the source text becomes incredibly strategic for the learner is how it approaches adding this color.
Yeah, because it doesn't overcomplicate it.
Exactly. It doesn't tell the learner to go memorize a dictionary of obscure psychological terms. It doesn't ask you to learn the subtle differences between being melancholic, despondent, or wistful.
Thank goodness.
Instead, it strips the human experience down to a very tight foundational vocabulary.
Yes. And this is the part I find really interesting, but also a little bit surprising, to be honest. Let's get into the actual toolkit the source provides.
You do it.
The text introduces a core list of emotion words. Here they are: happy, excited, nervous, tired, relaxed, stressed.
That's it.
That's it. Just 6 words. Now, I have to be honest. When I first read that, my initial thought was, isn't this a bit of a regression?
How so?
Well, if we're trying to sound fluent and sophisticated, aren't these 6 words incredibly basic? Shouldn't an adult learner be aiming higher than the vocabulary of a kindergartner?
It is a very common reaction to look at a list like that and feel it's too rudimentary. But from a cognitive science and linguistics perspective, this restriction is brilliant.
Brilliant.
Yes, this is about managing cognitive load. When you are speaking a learned language, your brain is already working overtime. You are translating concepts. You are monitoring your pronunciation. You are scanning the listener's face for comprehension.
And trying to remember the right verb tense.
Exactly. Your working memory is maxed out.
Mm.
If you also try to retrieve a highly complex, nuanced emotional idiom, let's say you try to use the phrase, I am at the end of my tether, and you misremember it as I am at the end of my rope, or you mispronounce a syllable, the entire communicative effort collapses.
Oh, totally. The listener is confused, the empathy is broken, and you just feel embarrassed.
So, by restricting the vocabulary to these 6 reliable anchors, you are actually freeing up mental bandwidth.
You completely remove the cognitive load of advanced vocabulary retrieval.
Precisely. Let's break down the utility of these 6 specific words, because they aren't just random choices. They cover the primary spectrum of daily adult experience.
Okay, let's look at them.
Happy and excited act as your primary engines for positive connection. They signal openness and approachability.
Makes sense.
Nervous and stressed are your primary engines for expressing vulnerability or seeking support. They signal that you are facing a challenge and might need grace. And tired and relaxed are your energy indicators. They communicate your current physical or mental capacity to the people around you.
That reframes it completely. They aren't just vocabulary words, they're functional indicators.
Yes.
And the source text pairs these 6 foundational words with an incredibly simple unifying structure. The I feel sentence. I feel happy. I feel tired. I feel stressed. It removes all the grammatical gymnastics.
Completely.
There are no complicated prepositions to worry about, no complex phrasal verbs, just subject, verb, and the emotional anchor.
And there is a very specific reason the text advocates for this I feel structure.
Yeah.
It is universally understood, and it leaves zero ambiguity.
Zero.
If you try to use a culturally specific idiom to express that you are stressed, like saying I'm swamped or I'm in the weeds, a non-native listener or even a native listener from a different region might not catch your meaning.
Right, if you say I'm in the weeds in a corporate office in London, they might look at you like you're crazy.
Exactly. But if you simply say, I feel stressed, the message is received instantly across any cultural or linguistic barrier.
Yeah.
True fluency, especially in a globalized world, isn't about how many obscure idioms you have memorized to prove you sound like a native.
Yeah.
True fluency is about how effectively and accurately you can transmit your internal reality to another human being. Clarity is always more effective than complexity.
True fluency is the effective transmission of reality, not a vocabulary test. I really like that framing. The text isn't dumbing down the language, it's optimizing it for connection.
That's a perfect way to summarize it.
So I want to take a second and pause right here. Think about those 6 words. Happy, excited, nervous, tired, relaxed, stressed. Which of those 6 words best describes how you are feeling right at this exact moment?
Just pick one.
Yeah, just pick one. Put it into that simple sentence, I feel. Say it silently in your head or say it out loud if you were driving or walking right now. It is incredibly simple, but just the act of claiming that emotional state in English forces a slightly different awareness of yourself in the language.
It immediately grounds the learner in the present moment, shifting English from an academic subject you are studying into a lived experience you are currently inhabiting. And once a learner has internalized that foundational 6-word toolkit, the source material guides us into a vital conceptual division. It categorizes our daily experiences into 2 distinct halves, sharing positive experiences and navigating difficult ones.
Okay, let's start with the positive side of the spectrum. The text says, these are feelings we often share when something good happens. And the examples they give are really interesting because they go slightly beyond just happy.
They do.
The text suggests phrases like, I feel proud of my work, I'm really excited about the weekend, I feel grateful for my family. Now, on the surface, these seem like very standard sentences, but I imagine there is a psychological weight to using them in a second language.
There's an immense psychological weight to them. I want to highlight the words proud and grateful in particular.
Okay.
Stating pride or gratitude in a language that is not your native tongue can feel surprisingly exposing. When we learn a language, we are usually taught the mechanics of survival and external transaction.
Like how to ask for directions.
How to ask for directions, how to order food, how to book a hotel. Those are very safe, externalized scripts. But to look a colleague in the eye and say, I feel proud of my work on this project requires you to own your achievements and state your self-worth out loud using a linguistic tool that you might not feel entirely confident wielding.
Wow.
To say, I feel grateful for my family, is to expose your heart and your deepest attachments.
It's like taking off armor.
It is.
Because when you are operating in a second language, you often feel a bit like an imposter, right? Like you're just
Right.
playing a role, so you stick to the script. But saying, I feel proud, breaks the script. It asserts your identity.
Yes.
It tells the native speaker, I am not just someone practicing English vocabulary on you. I am a whole, three-dimensional human being with a rich internal life, and I am choosing to share a piece of it with you.
Exactly. It shifts the dynamic instantly from a transactional language exchange into a deeply personal relationship. When a native speaker hears a learner use English to express profound gratitude or personal pride,
Yeah.
they don't hear the slight accent or the minor grammatical error.
Yeah.
They hear the humanity. However, as the source text very rightly points out, the human experience isn't just about pride and gratitude. Not every day is perfect.
Definitely not.
The material explicitly and intentionally moves into the territory of difficult emotions. It introduces a darker, heavier vocabulary. Words like stressed, worried, frustrated, overwhelmed.
And this is where I think the text does its most important work. Because if expressing pride is hard, expressing feeling overwhelmed in a second language feels almost impossible.
It really does.
The text gives examples like, I feel a little stressed today, I'm worried about my exam, I felt overwhelmed at work. I think there is this unwritten rule we adopt when we are living or working in a foreign country or speaking a second language. We adopt what I call the perfect guest syndrome.
The perfect guest syndrome. That is a very apt description. Describe what you mean by that.
Well, it's this internalized pressure that because you are the outsider, because you are the one adapting to their language or their culture, you have to be agreeable all the time. You have to be smiling, accommodating, and perpetually fine. You don't want to be a burden. You don't want to seem ungrateful for the opportunity to be there. You certainly don't want to complain. So if a colleague asks how the new project is going and you say, I'm fine, but internally you are drowning in confusion and stress, you're building a massive wall between you and the people who could actually help you.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of sociolinguistics, that wall you were describing leads to one of the most dangerous and under-discussed side effects of language learning: profound isolation.
Isolation.
Yes. This is why we could argue quite strongly that mastering the vocabulary for negative or difficult emotions is actually far more crucial for a learner's psychological well-being and ultimate success than mastering the positive ones.
Wait, really? More crucial than the positive ones?
Absolutely. Think about the mechanics of it. If you can only express happiness and agreement, you become a one-dimensional caricature of yourself.
Just a smiling face.
Exactly. People might think you are pleasant, but they won't truly know you. But more importantly, if you cannot express worry, frustration, or the feeling of being overwhelmed, you are trapped in a silo. You lack the linguistic tools to ask for help, to set a boundary, or to seek comfort.
You're just stuck.
You are forced to process your hardest, most challenging days entirely alone, trapped inside your own head, because you simply don't have the words to externalize the struggle.
Wow. I honestly hadn't thought about it as a matter of self-preservation.
But it is.
If you can't tell your boss, I feel overwhelmed, you are going to burn out, and they won't even see it coming because you kept saying you were fine.
Right.
If you can't tell your friend, I feel worried, you just suffer in silence.
That is exactly the stakes we are dealing with. And this is why the source material does something vital here. It doesn't just provide the vocabulary. It provides explicit, stated permission. The text says, and I quote, "And it's okay to express those emotions too."
Permission to be real.
Yes. By giving learners the simple frameworks, I feel stressed, or I am worried, the text is handing them a lifeline. It validates the negative experience and provides a safe, simple way to signal to the outside world that the learner is struggling and requires support or grace.
It gives you your voice back. It allows you to be a complex human being who sometimes has a bad day instead of just the smiling foreigner.
Exactly.
But what I really love about this source text is that it doesn't just leave you with these blunt instruments. It doesn't just say, walk around telling everyone you are stressed. It moves into what I think is the most sophisticated part of the guide. It gives us what I like to call the grammatical secret weapons. Let's talk about the mechanics of nuance.
Yes, the modifiers. The text introduces a highly efficient way to add crucial detail and scale to these emotions without requiring the learner to memorize a thesaurus.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text shows us how a tiny, seemingly insignificant word changes the entire landscape of the conversation. It introduces the modifiers, a little, very, and quite.
Crucial words.
Think about the massive difference here. The text compares saying, I feel nervous, to saying, I feel a little nervous or I feel very excited. It is such a small grammatical addition, but it completely alters the stakes of what you are communicating.
In linguistics and behavioral psychology, we refer to this as the concept of calibration. You are calibrating or fine-tuning the intensity of your emotional state for the listener. And this is vital for sounding natural and appropriate in different social contexts.
Because we aren't robots.
Right. Human emotions are rarely binary. We are rarely operating at an absolute 0 or an absolute 10. We live in the gray areas.
Right.
By giving the learner these specific modifiers, a little, quite, very, the source text allows the speaker to dial their emotional expression up or down with incredible precision.
It is literally like giving them volume knobs for their feelings.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the genius of it is that it allows for this high-level precision without requiring the learner to acquire a massive, complex dictionary. You don't need to learn the escalating words for fear. You don't need to know apprehensive, anxious, frightened, terrified, and petrified.
Who has the time for that?
Exactly. You simply take your reliable base word, nervous, and you use the volume knobs. I feel a little nervous as a volume level of 2. I feel quite nervous as a volume level of 5. I feel very nervous as a volume level of 9. You gain an entire spectrum of emotional expression with just 3 tiny modifier words.
And it makes your English sound so incredibly natural because it shows you understand proportion. Going back to my earlier worry about looking incompetent in front of a boss, this is the solution.
It is.
If you walk into a major meeting and bluntly state, I am terrified, or even just, I am nervous, without a modifier, people might panic. They might think you were entirely unprepared. But if you walk in and smile and say, I feel a little nervous, but I'm ready, it is charming.
It shows humanity.
It shows humility and self-awareness, but it doesn't sound alarms. Calibration is everything. It controls the room's reaction to you.
It is the essence of practical fluency. It demonstrates emotional intelligence alongside linguistic capability. And what the source text does next is show how we can string these calibrated motions together to reflect the actual complexity of real life.
Oh, this is the storytelling part.
Yes, it moves from isolated sentences into the application of storytelling. The text states, a great way to practice emotion vocabulary is to describe your day. And to do this, it provides examples that use a specific, highly effective formula of contrast.
The but conjunction. I loved this part. The text gives 2 brilliant examples of how to do this. Today was busy, but I feel satisfied. And I was nervous this morning, but now I feel relaxed. It seems so simple, but there is a lot happening beneath the surface of those sentences, isn't there?
There is a tremendous amount happening there linguistically. Notice the architecture of those sentences. They're not just reporting a sequence of facts. They're creating an instant miniature narrative arc.
A narrative arc, right?
A story fundamentally requires conflict and resolution. In the first example, today was busy. The word buddy represents the conflict, the challenge, or the tension of the day. The word but acts as the pivot point, the transition. And I feel satisfied is the resolution.
Wow.
In just one single elementary sentence, using the simplest vocabulary possible, the speaker has delivered a complete, compelling story about their experience. They have taken the listener on a journey.
It is literally the hero's journey in 8 words. I was nervous this morning, but now I feel relaxed. You have the initial tension, the climax of whatever caused the nervousness, and the peaceful resolution.
It's elegant.
It is so much more engaging than just shrugging and saying, today was fine. When you use that contrast formula, you are doing something deeply relational. You are inviting the listener to celebrate your relief with you. You are showing them your resilience. You are saying, I faced a challenge and I overcame it. That builds massive rapport.
It does. It signals to the listener that you are a dynamic individual who processes their experiences, rather than a passive observer of your own life. And this brings us to perhaps the most critical and actionable part of this entire source text. We can analyze the sociology and linguistics of these phrases all day, but the deep dive wouldn't be complete if we didn't discuss the actual daily practice the text recommends. Because ultimately, this is about rewiring the brain's approach to the English language.
Yes, let's get into the practical application. The source material culminates in a very specific, actionable directive for the learner. It tells them to practice a simple exercise every single day. Ask yourself the question, how do I feel today? And then answer it in English.
It is a micro-habit.
It is. And I cannot praise the sheer simplicity of this micro habit enough. It takes zero preparation. You don't need to sit down at a desk with a grammar textbook. You don't need a study buddy or a tutor. You don't even need a pen and paper.
Not at all.
You can do it in the shower. You can do it while waiting for the bus. You can do it while making your morning coffee. How do I feel today? I feel a little tired. I feel excited about tomorrow. It literally takes 5 seconds.
5 seconds, yes.
But why is this specific 5-second habit so powerful? Because the text claims it helps train your brain to think in English. How does that actually work?
To understand why this is so effective, we have to look at the cognitive science of adult language acquisition, specifically the translation barrier.
The translation barrier.
When adults learn a second language, they almost always process it through the filter of their native language first. Let's say you are a native Spanish speaker. Something happens, and you feel an emotion. You feel that emotion in Spanish. You conceptualize the sentence to describe it in Spanish.
Right.
And then your brain acts as a frantic dictionary, translating that Spanish concept into English words, checking the grammar, and finally speaking it out loud.
Right. There is that distinct lag time. And that lag time makes the language feel foreign. It makes it feel like an external math problem you are solving rather than a natural expression.
Exactly. It creates a psychological distance from the language. But this daily exercise, asking, how do I feel, and answering in English, leverages a concept known as embodied cognition.
Embodied cognition.
By asking the question and answering it directly in English while you are actively experiencing the emotion physically in your body, you are forcing your brain to bypass the native language entirely. You are directly tying the English vocabulary to your internal physiological state. Your heart rate is slightly elevated because you are stressed, and in that exact moment, you formulate the thought, I feel stressed.
It creates a direct wire from your nervous system to your English vocabulary. You are skipping the middleman of your native language.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. Yes, you are skipping the middleman. And neurologically, this creates much stronger, more deeply ingrained memory pathways than any rote memorization of flashcards ever could.
Flashcards are the worst.
When you memorize a list of emotion words on a page, your brain stores it as abstract data. It is easily forgotten. But when you wake up genuinely exhausted, your body feels heavy, and you force your brain to formulate the thought, I feel very tired today. In English, you are linking the vocabulary to a real, lived, visceral experience.
It sticks.
The brain prioritizes information that is emotionally salient. This daily practice is quite literally rewiring your neural networks to make English a language of genuine feeling, rather than just a sterile language of academic study.
It transforms English from something you do into something you are. And there is a piece of profound wisdom in the final message of the source text that I think ties this entire philosophy together.
Yeah.
I honestly think every single language learner needs to hear this, print it out, and tape it to their bathroom mirror.
It's a great quote.
The text says, remember, your sentences don't need to be perfect. Simple sentences are enough.
That is perhaps the single most important takeaway of the entire document, and it addresses the biggest plague in adult language learning: perfectionism. The pursuit of grammatical perfection is the greatest obstacle to natural speaking and true fluency.
I see this all the time. People are so terrified of sounding foolish.
They are. Learners become so paralyzed by the fear of using the wrong tense, the wrong article, or mispronouncing a vowel that they actively choose silence over connection. Or they revert to the impenetrable safety of I'm fine because I'm fine is grammatically foolproof. But by explicitly stating that simple sentences are enough, the source text is establishing a new hierarchy of values. It is prioritizing emotional truth over grammatical perfection.
It is giving you permission to be messy, because being human is messy. Think about it in a real-world context.
Okay.
When you are talking to a friend or a colleague who cares about you, they do not care if you perfectly executed a complex conditional clause. They care about you. They care about your well-being. If you look at a friend and say, yesterday I feel very sad, yes, the grammar is technically incorrect. A teacher would mark it with a red pen. You should have said felt.
Right.
But in the real world, did the emotional truth translate? Absolutely.
Okay.
Did your friend understand that you were hurting and needed support? Yes. The empathy was triggered, the connection was made. And that, fundamentally, is what true fluency is. Fluency is the ability to connect.
This raises an important question for the learner. What is your ultimate goal? Is it to pass a standardized grammar test? Or is it to build a life, relationships, and a career using this language? If it is the latter, then emotional resonance will always trump grammatical flawlessness.
So here is my direct challenge to you, the listener. I want you to adopt this micro habit tomorrow morning. Do not wait for the perfect moment. When you wake up, before you check your phone, before you listen to the news, before you do anything else, ask yourself in English, how do I feel today?
It's that simple.
Use the simple core words. Use the modifiers to calibrate the volume. Allow yourself to be messy. Allow yourself to use a simple, imperfect sentence to capture a complex, perfect truth. Because as the text reminds us, consistency, just keeping practicing every day, is the real key to rewiring your brain and sounding natural.
I agree entirely. Knowledge is only valuable when it is applied. We can sit here and analyze the psychology, the cognitive science, and the sociolinguistics of emotional vocabulary for hours, but it will not change your fluency one bit until you actually speak the words out loud. Embrace the elegant simplicity of the I feel structure. Embrace the courage and vulnerability required to state your true emotions in a language that is not your own. Let go of the paralyzing need for complex perfection and focus your energy on genuine daily application.
So what does this all mean? If we zoom out and look back at the entire journey we have taken through this source material, it really boils down to a fundamental paradigm shift in how we view the purpose of language.
Yes.
The ultimate goal of learning English, or learning any language, isn't just to become a highly efficient machine that transmits logistical data without errors. The goal is to connect human to human. The goal is to share the vibrant color of your internal world and to be able to see and respond to the color in others.
That's beautifully said.
And moving past the automatic, robotic, defensive shield of "I'm fine" is the very first necessary step on that path to true connection.
It is about reclaiming your authenticity and your identity in a new linguistic environment. You are a complex, feeling, dynamic individual in your native language, and you absolutely deserve to be recognized as a complex, feeling, dynamic individual in English as well. You do not have to leave your humanity behind when you switch languages.
Exactly. You deserve to be fully yourself in every language you speak. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought. Something for you to mull over today that builds on the psychology we've just discussed.
I love a good lingering thought.
We have spent this whole time focusing outward, discussing how expressing your emotions changes how others perceive your English. It makes them see you as more natural, more personal, more approachable.
Right.
But consider this inward shift. If you make a daily habit of asking yourself, how do I feel today, in a completely different language, does translating your emotions actually change the way you experience them?
Oh, that's interesting.
If you force yourself to simplify your complex feelings into these core foundational English words, does stepping into a new language give you an entirely new, perhaps more objective lens for viewing your own heart? Think about that the next time someone asks you, how are you? Keep exploring, keep practicing, and thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you for listening. Be well and keep speaking your truth.